Hello, Mr. Tanggu. Today, our group will present a case study analysis on international humanitarian law, the India-Pakistan conflict, and the Myanmar conflict. Before we start the presentation, I will introduce the names of our group members. They are Agatha Audrey, Gabriel Bionri, Jessie Desiana, and Fania. Next slide.
Following the Second World War, the British promised India equality and independence. Eventually, in 1940s, the India independence movement was split into two: the Greater India Independence Movement led by Mahatma Gandhi and the Muslim Nationalist Independence Movement led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah. The Greater India Independence Movement tried to unite India into India, whereas the Muslim Nationalist Movement tries to control its own state in order to pursue Muslim. Due to the emergence of difference between these two movements, India's situation has become chaotic, and in order to overcome this, the British provided a solution to India, namely the retreat of British troops in India to India and the British declaration to divide India into two independent countries. On August 14, 1947, the independence movement for Muslim nationalism succeeded in establishing its own country called Pakistan, and the day after, on August 15, 1947, the Greater India Independence Movement also succeeded in establishing the State of India. The emergence of a state territory provoked a claim to the territory, as India and Pakistan have been doing. However, the two countries refused to give up the territory because they decided not to give in to each other, so the border became the point of conflict between India and Pakistan. The Kashmir conflict is a dispute between India and Pakistan. Kashmir is an area located at the western end of the Himalayas, bordering India and Pakistan. This conflict has lasted for 2 periods of war, beginning with the signing of the Instrument of Partition by Maharaja Singh in 1947. For some Kashmiris, the presence of the Partition Instrument marked the beginning of a nightmare, because some Kashmir compared the region's integration into India. President formed a resistance group to attack Maharaja Singh. Because the insurgency group is from Pakistan northwestern province, it's not surprising that the group is more pro-Pakistan in terms of ownership. It appears that the resistance group is not strong enough to fight the Indian government, allowing the Indian government to successfully control the resistance. Following the ratification, India and Pakistan became members of Geneva Convention in 1949. The war continued in 1965 after India murdered 25 Pakistani soldiers. This sparked an armed conflict between the two countries, triggered by the disguise one of the Pakistani soldiers as an Indian Kashmiri civilian with the intention of seizing the region by attacking Indian troops. There was gunfire between the Indian and Pakistan armies during the attack. The armed conflict lasted until early January 1966, when the Tashkent Agreement was signed, requiring both sides to withdraw their troops by the end of February. Next slide, please. The main focus of the India-Pakistan conflict is to analyze and find out what violation of international humanitarian law has been committed, such as the principle of distinction and the principle of proportionality. Right.
In the analysis case study of the India-Pakistan conflict, our group used relevant theories based on humanitarian law, namely jus ad bellum and jus in bello theory. In theory jus ad bellum, India was legal to conduct the war due to self-defense to maintain its territory in Kashmir. At the same time, Pakistan was illegally conducting the war due to Pakistan attacking India's territorial sovereignty. In theory jus in bello, we also identified infringements that didn't follow the principles of international law, such as distinction and proportionality principles. The distinction principles refers to the legality of the attackers attacking the military and not civilians. In contrast, the principle of proportionality refers to the principle that distinguishes the form of attack which is not allowed if the military is in local population settlements. However, in the conflict between India and Pakistan, many casualties were found who were indigenous Kashmirs. Interestingly, international humanitarian law didn't prevail between India and Pakistan. For instance, in the conflict in 1947, the form of attack was considered as an internal disturbance, and international humanitarian law would apply if the World War III humanitarian law wasn't prevailing. Nevertheless, in 1965, international humanitarian law prevailed due to Pakistan's infiltration of the Indian territory of Kashmir, which triggered armed contact between the Indian and Pakistani troops. So this conflict was categorized as an armed conflict. Next slide. Then we can conclude that the conflict between India and Pakistan was born from the struggle for territory and borders between the two countries after independence in 1947. The conflict can be regarded as a dispute in which India and Pakistan fight over the Kashmir region. In the Kashmir conflict in 1947, our group identified a form of attack as internal disturbance, so international humanitarian law wasn't prevailing. However, in the Kashmir conflict in 1965, our group identified a form of attack as an armed conflict. Next slide.
Now we get into the second case study, which is Myanmar conflict. What is the background? The conflict in Myanmar is a form of massacre or ethnic cleansing of the Rohingya Muslim ethnic group by the Myanmar military junta. Myanmar conflict has been going on since 17th century and has been positioned the Rohingya Muslims as the victim who have experienced the most crime. The Myanmar military junta also carried out arson action in several areas or villages of the Rohingya minority community. The peak of this conflict was when Myanmar government issued a law governing of the population of Burma in 1982, Article 2, which certified citizenship means a certificate of citizenship granted under the Union citizenship. The population law is one of the factors that triggers and causes the act of oppression, discrimination, and violence against Rohingya Muslims because they are considered a community that does not have exclusive rights and does not have citizenship in Myanmar. So what is the main focus of the Myanmar conflict? The main focus in this conflict is to see what violation of international humanitarian law have been committed by the military junta against the Rohingya people in Myanmar. The human rights violation committed by the Myanmar military junta have made Rohingya Muslims feel uncomfortable and feel that their right to live has been restricted and forcibly taken away by the Myanmar military junta.
Next, I will explain about the analysis. In analyzing the Myanmar conflict, our group has found that there are several violations of international humanitarian law. The first violation is human rights. So basically, we know that human rights have been owned by every human being since they were born. There are several human rights violations committed by Junta Myanmar, include rape and murder. In the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court 1998, it explained about the definition of human rights violations. The forms of human rights violations contained in the Rome Statute include the crime of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and crimes of aggression. Next, our group has also analyzed the Myanmar conflict using the jus in bellum and jus in bello theories. From jus in bellum theory about the legality of the use of violence, the actions taken by the junta Myanmar cannot be justified in the international humanitarian law because the attacks carried out by the junta Myanmar were not a form of self-defense, but because a form of discrimination that was deliberately aimed at Rohingya Muslims. Next. So the conclusion from our group's analysis of the conflict in Myanmar can be seen that the Myanmar junta has the biggest role in violating the international humanitarian law and make the Rohingya Muslim ethnic as the main victims in this conflict. Serious violations of international humanitarian law such as human rights, principle of proportionality, and the theory of jus in bello and jus in bellum. Our group also concludes that the violations of several principles of international humanitarian law still exist, such as the Myanmar conflict and India-Pakistan conflict, which should receive special attention from the international community. And that's all from us. Thank you.